The mic is hot. Let's break this down. If you think you are watching a boring corporate merger between Warner Bros. And Netflix, you are looking at the wrong screen. This isn't business. This is a mob shakedown. This is The Sopranos playing out on CNBC. Here's the setup. Netflix thought they had this in the bag. They walked into Hollywood like they owned the place, because usually they do. Their plan was arrogant and simple. We'll take the good stuff, we'll take HBO, we'll take the movie studios, and you can keep the trash. And by trash, they meant CNN. They were going to leave the news network to die in the gutter, because let's face it, Netflix doesn't do news. They do Squid Game. It was a cold, calculated financial move, and it was working. Until yesterday. Because Donald Trump didn't just walk into the room, he kicked the door off the hinges. He looked at this deal, this massive, complex financial instrument, and he said, no. He didn't file a lawsuit. He didn't pass a law. He just went public and effectively said, if you want the prize, you have to take the poison. He is forcing Netflix to buy CNN. Why? That's the question nobody on TV is asking because they're too afraid of the answer. Why would the president want a tech giant to own a news network that hates him? Because it's a trap. He knows Netflix hates linear TV. He knows CNN is bleeding money. By forcing Netflix to swallow CNN, he's handing them a grenade with the pin pulled out. He's burdening his biggest cultural rival with a dying asset. And the threat? It wasn't subtle. He used the A word. Antitrust. That is the loaded gun on the table. He is telling Netflix, play ball my way, or I will tie you up in court until your stock price hits zero. This is the part that should scare you. We aren't talking about free markets anymore. We're talking about the White House designing the media landscape by force. You thought you were just subscribing to a streaming service? No, you are funding a hostage negotiation, and right now, Netflix is sweating. Okay, take a breath. To understand why the President of the United States is holding a gun to the head of a streaming service, we have to look at the crime scene. And I don't mean the press release they put out yesterday. I mean the last 10 years of media history. Because if you don't understand the before, you cannot understand the panic we are seeing right now. Let's rewind to a time that feels like ancient history, but was actually like 2012. Do you remember the bundle? Do you remember having a cable box? It was the greatest scam in the history of American business, and I say that with total respect for the hustle. It was brilliant. You paid $100 a month for 500 channels. You watched maybe 4 of them, but here's the genius part. You were paying for all of them. You were paying for ESPN even if you hated sports. You were paying for MTV even if you were 80 years old. And most importantly, you were paying for CNN, Fox, and MSNBC even if you never, ever turned on the news. It was a tax. A private tax levied on every household in America. And for decades, it made media companies richer than God. They didn't care if their ratings dropped. They didn't care if you hated the content. They got your carriage fee every single month, automatically. It was a license to print money. And then Netflix happened. Reed Hastings, the guy running Netflix, didn't just build a streaming service. He handed you a pair of scissors and said, cut the cord. And we did. We all did. We looked at that $100 cable bill and said, wait, I can get everything I actually like for $10? It felt like freedom, didn't it? It felt like we were winning. But here is the part nobody told you. When you cut the cord, you didn't just save money. You destroyed the business model that kept the entire American media landscape alive. Fast forward to today, that bundle money is gone, evaporated. And the companies that relied on it, like Warner Bros., like Paramount, like Disney, are suddenly realizing they are broke. They spent decades getting fat on easy money, and now they're starving. This brings us to the man of the hour, David Zaslav. He's the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery. He's the guy currently trying to sell the company. And you have to understand his position because it's tragic. He took over this company a few years ago with a promise to fix it. He cut costs, he canceled movies, remember Batgirl? He deleted it for a tax write-off. He was ruthless. But he has a problem he can't fix: debt. Warner Brothers Discovery is sitting on something like $40 billion in debt. That isn't business debt. That is, we are going to lose the house debt. With interest rates where they are, that debt is eating them alive. Every dollar your subscription pays to Max, it's going to pay the interest on the credit card. It's not going to new movies. Zaslav has no choice. He has to sell. He's the guy at the pawn shop at 2 a.m. holding his grandfather's watch. He needs cash, and he needs it now. So who has the cash? Netflix. Netflix won the war. They are the only ones with a stock price high enough to buy Warner Bros. Without blinking. So the deal makes sense on paper, right? Netflix writes a check, Warner Bros. Gets saved, and we all get Batman on Netflix. But here's the straw man, the argument the suits on CNBC are making. They're saying, oh, it's just a standard consolidation. It's good for the consumer. One app for everything. Stop. Don't fall for that, because Netflix looked at Warner Bros. And saw two things. They saw assets and they saw liabilities. The assets, the movie studio, HBO, Game of Thrones, the stuff you watch. The liability, CNN. See, in the old days, owning a cable news network was power. It was prestige. You could influence elections. You could shape the narrative. Today, owning a cable news network is like owning a coal mine in a solar-powered world. It's dirty, it's expensive, the regulations are a nightmare, and the audience is dying off, literally and metaphorically. The average cable news viewer is, let's just say, they aren't the demographic Netflix cares about. Netflix runs on algorithms. They know exactly what you want, and their data tells them a brutal truth. You do not want 24-hour partisan shouting matches interrupting your binge watch of Stranger Things. So Netflix's offer was cold-blooded. They said, we will buy the studio, we will buy HBO, but we are not buying CNN. You keep it, spin it off, let it die on its own. It was the perfect plan. It solved Netflix's content problem without inheriting the headache of running a political newsroom during the most polarized era in American history. And that is exactly the moment the trap snapped shut. Because Donald Trump looked at that plan and saw an opening. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is Trump just being petty? Does he just want to mess with CNN because they fight? Maybe, sure, that's part of it. But if you think that's the whole story, you are missing the bigger picture. Trump understands media better than any politician in history. He knows that if Netflix buys Warner Bros. Without CNN, CNN becomes a standalone company, an orphan company. And what happens to an orphan company with declining revenue and no corporate parent to pay the bills? It gets desperate. It gets cheap. It gets bought by, well, anyone. Maybe a hedge fund, maybe a foreign entity, maybe it just goes bankrupt and disappears. But if Trump forces Netflix to buy it, now he has leverage. Think about it. Netflix is a tech company. They need government goodwill. They need broadband infrastructure. They need not to be broken up by the FTC. They have regulatory vulnerabilities everywhere. If they own CNN, suddenly the president has a direct line to their CEO. Nice streaming service you have there. Shame if the DOJ started looking into your algorithm. By forcing CNN into the deal, Trump isn't saving CNN. He's handcuffing Netflix. He's making sure that the biggest media pipe in the world, Netflix, is now responsible to the news, and that means they're responsible to him. He used the antitrust threat as the weapon. He said mergers that consolidate too much power are bad, which is rich coming from a pro-business administration, right? But he's using the left's own arguments against them. He's saying, hey, you guys hate monopolies? Me too. So I'm blocking this unless you do what I say. It is 4D chess played with a sledgehammer. And let's look at the numbers because they don't lie. The media is trying to tell you that this is about preserving journalism. Please. CNN's ratings are in the toilet. Their profits are down. If this was a pure free market decision, CNN would have been sold for parts 5 years ago. The only reason it exists is because it was subsidized by that bundle I told you about. But the bundle is dead. The subsidy is gone. So now we have a zombie network. It's walking around, but it's not really alive. Netflix tried to double tap it, put it out of its misery, by excluding it from the deal, and the president stepped in and said, no, keep it alive. I have a use for it. This is the catalyst. The WBD board is panicking. They thought they had a graceful exit. They thought they could cash out. Now they are realizing that to get their money, they have to navigate a political minefield that could blow up the entire company. The false hope here, the thing everyone is whispering about at lunch in LA and NY, is this. Maybe they can just find another buyer. Maybe Skydance or Paramount will just take CNN and Netflix takes the rest. It sounds so simple, right? Just split the baby. Everyone gets what they want. Let me tell you why that is a fantasy. Let me tell you why that solution is actually the worst possible outcome for everyone involved, and why it might crash the entire industry. Because you can't just split a company like this without spilling blood. The mic is hot. Let's get into the gears. I want you to picture this. It's the only way to understand the absolute insanity of what is happening in that boardroom. Imagine you're trying to buy your dream house. It's a mansion. It's got the pool, the theater, the history. It's Warner Bros. It's perfect. You have the cash, you're ready to sign. But there is one clause in the contract, written in tiny print at the bottom. If you buy the house, you also have to adopt the angry, shouting uncle who lives in the basement. He doesn't pay rent, he scares the neighbors, he fights with everyone, and he owes a lot of money to the bank. That uncle is CNN. Now, normally you'd say, no thanks, I'll buy the house, but the uncle has to go. That's what Netflix tried to do. Rational, right? But then the mayor of the town, Donald Trump, shows up and says, nope, you want the house? You take the uncle. And if you try to kick him out, I'm going to shut off your water and electricity. That is the mechanism of this trap. It's called a poison pill, but this time the government is forcing you to swallow it. And here is the catch-22 that has Reed Hastings and the Netflix executives waking up screaming. They are stuck between two different types of death. Death option A, they walk away. They say, forget it, too much trouble. If they do that, their biggest competitor, Paramount Skydance, swoops in. We'll get to them in a second, but if Skydance gets Warner Bros., Netflix suddenly has a massive, consolidated rival backed by Oracle money, a rival that owns the content Netflix needs to survive. Death option B, they cave. They say, fine, Mr. President, we'll take CNN. Do you know what happens then? The Netflix multiple dies. This is nerdy finance stuff, but stay with me because it affects your 401k. Netflix trades at a huge premium on the stock market because they are a tech company. They are lean, they are digital, they are the future. CNN is a linear asset. It's old school, it's dying. If Netflix buys CNN, Wall Street stops looking at Netflix as a cool tech company and starts looking at them as a dusty old media conglomerate. Their stock price crashes. Their valuation gets cut in half. So they are damned if they buy and damned if they don't. I know, it sounds crazy. I wish I was making this up. You have the most successful media company in the world paralyzed because they can't figure out what to do with a 24-hour news channel that nobody watches anymore. But wait, it gets darker. Let's talk about the other guy, because you can't understand a hostage situation without knowing who's waiting in the getaway car. Enter David Ellison, Skydance. If you don't know the name, you know the money. His dad is Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, one of the richest men on Earth, and, this is crucial, a massive donor and supporter of Donald Trump. David Ellison wants Warner Bros. Too, but unlike Netflix, his offer is different. He wants the whole thing. He's fine with keeping CNN. Why? Because the Ellisons think they can fix it. They think they can turn the news into something that aligns better with their worldview. So, connect the dots. Trump attacks the Netflix deal. He says it's bad for competition. He blocks the split strategy. What is the result? The Netflix deal dies. And who's standing there waiting to pick up the pieces? The guy whose dad just wrote a check to the campaign. It's so transparent, it's almost insulting. It's not about antitrust. It's not about monopolies. If it was about monopolies, they wouldn't let anyone buy Warner Bros. This is about steering the asset into the right hands. And here's the mechanism that breaks the system. This isn't just about one deal. It's about the weaponization of the regulatory state. For 40 years, antitrust meant protect the consumer. It meant prices are too high, break it up. Now, antitrust means do what I say or I will hurt you. If this precedent stands, every CEO in America is on notice. You want to buy a company? You want to merge? You better check with the White House first. You better make sure you're buying the right assets and hiring the right people. It is the chilling effect to end all chilling effects. And look at the domino effect starting to wobble. If Netflix walks away, Warner Bros. Stock, which is already in the toilet, goes through the floor. David Zaslav panics. He has that $40 billion in debt coming due. He has to sell. He has no leverage. So he sells to Skydance at a discount, a fire sale. The Ellisons take over. They slash costs. They fire thousands of people at Warner Bros., at HBO, at CNN. They restructure the newsroom. And Netflix? They remain the king of streaming, sure, but they are isolated. They just saw the government draw a line in the sand that says, you can grow, but only as much as we let you. We are at the point of no return. The free market in media is officially dead. We are now in the era of the managed market. And the craziest part? You are going to pay for it. Because when competition dies, when deals are made for political favors instead of business logic, efficiency goes out the window, prices go up, quality goes down, innovation stops. You thought the streaming wars were about who had the best movies? No, the streaming wars were just the opening act. We are now watching the state seize the means of distribution. So where does this leave us? What happens when the dust settles and the lawyers go home? Because there are only two ways this ends, and both of them change your life. Where does this leave us? What does the wreckage look like when the smoke clears? Because right now, you are standing at a fork in the road, and I need you to understand that both paths lead to a very different world than the one you grew up in. Let's look at the best case scenario first. And when I say best case, I mean the least worst. In this version, the deal falls apart. Netflix looks at the antitrust threat, looks at the debt, looks at the chaos, and says, we're out. They walk away. Warner Bros. Discovery is left standing at the altar. Their stock crashes, probably 30–40% overnight. Panic sets in. To survive, they have to start selling off the furniture. They sell HBO to Apple. They sell the DC universe to Amazon. They sell CNN to, a private equity firm that strips it for parts. It's messy, it's ugly, but at least the pieces land in different places. At least no single entity owns everything. It's a funeral for a media giant, but it preserves a little bit of competition. But let's be real, that is not what is going to happen. Here is the ugly truth. Here is the scenario that the smart money is betting on right now. Skydance wins, the Ellisons take over, and suddenly you have the birth of the first techno-political studio. You have a company that owns the history of Hollywood, Warner Bros., the prestige of TV, HBO, and the microphone of the world, CNN, all backed by Silicon Valley tech money and aligned, explicitly or implicitly, with the White House. Do you see the picture forming? By 2030, we aren't going to have streaming wars anymore. We're going to have the state-approved feed. Imagine waking up 5 years from now. You turn on your TV. There aren't 50 apps anymore. There are maybe 2. The price? It's not $15. It's $75, because where else are you going to go? You click on the news, but it doesn't look like news. It looks like a high-budget documentary produced by the same people who make the Avengers movies. It's slick, it's entertaining, and it tells you exactly what the people in power want you to hear. Because the messy news, the real reporting, the leaks, the stuff that makes politicians uncomfortable, that's gone. It was too expensive. It was too risky. It was inefficient. The algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. It feeds you the movie that keeps you docile and the news clip that keeps you scared of the other side, but not scared enough to revolt. It is the perfect closed loop, a golden cage of content. And the worst part, you'll probably thank them for it, because it's convenient. So, what do? I know, it feels overwhelming. You're just one person with a remote control. How do you fight a trillion-dollar merger? First, you stop feeding the beast blindly. Go look at your bank statement right now. Look at those $14.99 charges. If you are paying for a service just because it's always been there, cancel it. Force them to earn your money. If they want to merge and monopolize, make them bleed for it. Do not be a passive subscriber to your own indoctrination. Second, diversify your inputs. This is critical. If this deal goes through, the mainstream media is going to shrink into 1 or 2 giant megaphones. You cannot rely on them for the truth anymore. You need to find independent voices. You need to find local journalists. You need to find the people who aren't owned by a conglomerate that needs a favor from the president. Build your own network of information. Treat it like a survivalist treats food storage. Hoard the truth. And finally, just be aware. That is the most powerful weapon you have. When you see the headlines change next month, when you see CNN suddenly start being nicer to the administration, or Netflix suddenly burying a documentary that criticizes the government, don't shrug. Recognize it. Say it out loud. I know why this is happening. I know who paid for this. They are banking on you being asleep. They are banking on you being too tired from your job and your life to notice that they are rewriting the script of reality. Prove them wrong. The mic is off. Stay sharp.